A sharply dressed CEO shattered the silence of a crowded cafe in broad daylight when she humiliated a quiet single father in front of everyone, unaware that the scar on his arm would unravel a truth powerful enough to change all their lives forever. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel so more emotional stories like this can reach those who need them today. The cafe was filled with soft daylight pouring through tall glass windows, illuminating polished tables and the steady rhythm of a city moving forward without pause. At a corner table sat a man who looked out of place among the elegance and modern luxury. His name was Rowan Whitlock, a single father who wore a simple, slightly worn jacket despite the mild weather, his hands rough from years of honest work and sacrifice. He wasn't there for comfort or indulgence. He was there because he had been called for what he believed was a rare opportunity to rebuild stability for his young daughter. Across from him stood Evelina Cross, a rising CEO known for her brilliance and ruthless precision in business. She had built her reputation on control, perfection, and an intolerance for anything she deemed unworthy of her time. Her presence alone seemed to tighten the air around the table as she looked at Rowan with a quiet but cutting disappointment, as if his very existence in that space was an inconvenience she had not anticipated. Rowan tried to explain himself, not with excuses but with the calm honesty of someone who had lived too long with rejection to fight it aggressively. He spoke about experience, about survival, about the willingness to work harder than anyone else if given a chance. But Evelina's gaze never softened. Instead, she noticed the worn seams of his clothes, the faint fatigue in his posture, and the way his presence did not align with the polished image she expected from anyone who came near her company. Her words, sharp and dismissive, turned heads in the cafe. People pretended not to listen, yet every conversation faded into uneasy silence as Rowan was reduced in seconds from a hopeful applicant into an example of what she considered failure. The humiliation spread across his face like a slow bruise, but he did not react with anger. He simply lowered his eyes, as if trying to protect something fragile inside him from breaking completely. Near the entrance of the cafe stood Cashin Vale, Evelina's bodyguard, a man trained to observe everything but intervene only when necessary. He had seen countless interactions where power crushed vulnerability, but something about this moment felt heavier than the rest. Maybe it was the way Rowan remained composed despite being publicly dismissed, or maybe it was the quiet dignity in his silence. Cashin's attention, however, was pulled sharply when Rowan shifted slightly, rolling up his sleeve without thinking as he reached for a fallen document. That brief movement revealed a scar running along his forearm, jagged and unmistakably old, as though it had once carried a story written in pain and survival. Cashin froze. That scar was not unfamiliar. It belonged to a pattern he had seen only once before, during a chaotic moment years ago when lives had hung by threads and one man had stepped into danger without hesitation to save others. Cashin's mind pulled him backward into a memory he had never fully forgotten, a moment when Evelina's father had been caught in a violent incident during a private overseas visit. Everything had collapsed into panic, and in that chaos, a man with a similar build and unmistakable scar had pulled Evelina's father to safety while others fled. The memory had been classified, buried under legal reports and corporate silence, and the identity of that rescuer had never been confirmed. But Cashin remembered the arm, the wound, and the steady determination of a man who had walked back into danger when he could have escaped. Now, looking at Rowan sitting humiliated in a cafe chair, Cashin felt a chilling realization forming beneath his trained composure. The man Evelina was dismissing so easily might be the same man who had once saved her entire family. Rowan, unaware of the storm quietly building around him, gathered his papers with trembling restraint. The job opportunity he had pinned his hopes on was slipping away not because of his ability, but because of judgment formed in seconds. Evelina turned away already, her attention shifting to her phone, as if the encounter had been nothing more than a minor interruption in her schedule. But Cashin could not let the moment dissolve so easily. His instincts, sharpened by years of protection and loyalty, told him that something deeply important was being overlooked. Rowan's scar was not decorative or accidental, it was the mark of someone who had endured sacrifice, not avoided responsibility. And in that realization, Cashin saw not a failure, but a forgotten truth. The tension that followed was invisible to most of the café, yet it lingered like a storm pressing against glass. Rowan finally stood, preparing to leave with quiet dignity, accepting once again that life had closed another door on him without explanation. His thoughts drifted briefly to his daughter, imagining her waiting for him with the kind of hope that never understood rejection. That thought alone made the humiliation bearable. But as he reached the exit, Cashin stepped forward, not with authority but with urgency, studying Rowan's face more closely now. There was something in Rowan's expression that matched the fragment of memory he had held onto for years. Not arrogance, not desperation, but a quiet resilience that did not come from ordinary hardship. Evelina, noticing the interruption, frowned at Cashin's hesitation. She was not used to her bodyguard questioning her judgments, especially not over something as insignificant as a rejected applicant. But Cashin's silence carried weight. He asked Rowan nothing at first, only observing the scar again, the angle, the faded stitching of old trauma. Rowan, confused but patient, simply waited, as if accustomed to being examined and dismissed in equal measure. Then Cashin finally spoke, not with accusation, but with uncertainty shaped into realization. The memory of that past event returned fully, and with it came the possibility that the man standing before them had once risked his life for people who had never even learned his name. Evelina's expression shifted for the first time, a flicker of discomfort breaking through her composed exterior. She demanded clarity, refusing to accept ambiguity. Cashin explained carefully, revealing fragments of the past incident, the chaos, the rescue, the scar that matched exactly what he had seen before. Rowan listened quietly, and for the first time a faint heaviness entered his eyes. He confirmed nothing directly, but his silence carried its own truth. The reason he had never spoken of that day was simple. No recognition had followed, no gratitude had changed his life, and eventually, survival had demanded that he move forward without expecting acknowledgement from anyone. The café seemed smaller now, as if the truth had compressed the air inside it. Evelina's certainty began to crack, replaced by something unfamiliar and uncomfortable. The man she had dismissed moments earlier was no longer just an applicant, he was possibly someone whose actions had indirectly shaped her own life. Cashin pressed further, not out of doubt anymore, but out of responsibility. He reminded Evelina of the unresolved incident in her family's history, the mystery of the man who had saved her father and disappeared without reward. The realization did not arrive as drama but as a slow internal collapse of assumptions. Rowan finally spoke in a calm, steady tone that carried more weight than any defense could. He did not ask for recognition or apology. He simply explained that he had been in the right place when someone needed help, and that was all that had ever mattered to him. His voice carried no bitterness, only exhaustion shaped by years of choosing responsibility without expectation of return. Evelina stood frozen, confronted not only with her mistake but with the uncomfortable truth that her judgment had erased a person who had once given selflessly when it mattered most. The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that forces reflection. Evelina's gaze softened as she looked at Rowan again, truly seeing him for the first time beyond appearances and assumptions. The café, once filled with casual indifference, now felt like a place where something important had been revealed too late. Cashin stepped back slightly, allowing the weight of realization to settle naturally rather than forcing resolution. In the end, Rowan did not return to his seat, nor did he demand anything from the situation. He simply adjusted his worn jacket, carrying with him the same quiet strength he had arrived with. But something had changed. Evelina, for the first time in her life, experienced the discomfort of understanding that success without humility could blind even the most intelligent minds. She did not stop him as he left, but she also did not forget him. And Cashin, watching the encounter conclude, understood that some people walk through life without recognition not because they are insignificant, but because their importance was never measured correctly in the first place. Outside the café, Rowan stepped into the daylight once again, not defeated, but unchanged in essence. He still had no job offer, no sudden reversal of fortune, but he carried something quieter and more powerful than validation. He carried his truth intact. And somewhere behind him, The world he had briefly collided with was beginning to reconsider the way it looked at people who do not demand attention, but deserve remembrance. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And take a moment to comment on what you think matters more in life, recognition or quiet acts of kindness that no one sees but the world quietly depends on.